Hello, my name is Mark Taylor. Welcome to the Education on Fire podcast network. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello, my name is Mark Taylor. Welcome back to the Learning on Fire podcast. Today we are celebrating the fact that we've had 25 episodes go live, and today being our 26th, I just wanted to have this as a celebration, a chance to stop and take stock, which I feel that many people, including myself, don't necessarily take the time to do as often as maybe we should do. So I wanted to just sort of basically have a little pause here today and actually just have a think back over the people that have been on the show, to thank the people that have been on the show, and also just to have a little recap of some of the resources they've shared which have made big changes to their life, because I think even if we read or listened or heard to a tiny percentage of some of the things that have already been shared with us since September 2018, then our lives probably would look very different. There's still certainly a number of books and a number of things I want to be checking out from all the things that have been shared. So a big thank you to all of my guests, starting with Dr. Mark T. Wade, who was back in episode 1. Addison Zong, who came and was chatting to me about her classroom without walls and using technology for reimagining education. And then Georgian Benton, who's got a podcast called The Gratitude Podcast, which I'd recommend to listen to, just in terms of having a real deep understanding of the fact we're not just talking about implementing things, but it's understanding, whether it's spiritual or religious or whatever it is that talks to you or whatever it is that makes you who you are. You know, a really important part of how we are and how we share our life with other people, which can really make all the difference to how we perceive life and indeed how we show up in the world. We then had Jane Parkinson Hill talking about her STEAM school, and a wonderful conversation with Rick Clemens about Live Your Truth, and his whole journey from being married and living in middle America, and then his journey across America, and then divorcing, and then coming out of the closet, getting together with his partner, and some of the conversations he had around that in his career, which I just found truly touching, and I really urge anyone to go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already. Also, a big thank you to Hanny Mora, the softwarepreneur, and Jonathan Oakes, who again was a very touching conversation. He's the person that created Trivial Warfare podcast, but he was talking about his life growing up and the fact that he's struggling to have friends, and then how he's now just the centre of this entire podcast Trivial Warfare world, which is just taking over the world literally. And yeah, his conversation was very moving for me, and I really appreciated him being so open and transparent. And what I've really loved about this is the fact we've had such a large selection of people, but also lots of different topics, lots of people into different things. We had Mark Green with his Car Yeah podcast, and I know since then he's also got his TV show, which is up and running in America as well, which is incredible. He's just really killing just everything to do with cars, yeah, and it's a joy to be able to watch. I really appreciated Evan Burst talking about his online membership of the Cartoon Block. I met Evan at a live event in Nashville back in 2018, and he was very generous with his time and his support in terms of this podcast, and also sort of bringing Education on Fire into a podcast network, and now with the Primary Music on Fire membership site being a fully fledged thing that people can join. You know, just the people that have been there and done it, sharing their wisdom with me, is something that I'm incredibly appreciative about. We talked a little about education per se with Seth Perler, and his being an executive function coach, just sort of understanding exactly how learning works for certain children, and how we can support those people and in terms of how they turn up in their world, and how that's going to progress, and really support them to be able to do something I guess, on their own terms, in their own way, which is really kind of a big essence of what this podcast network is all about. But definitely an important conversation there, especially if you have children, or indeed you are a child going through school and they want some support and help in terms of how you can learn on your terms, in your best way, rather than just necessarily within the school system. Jeanette Stein, again, was someone I met in that particular conference in Nashville. Her high school maths program, which is online, or High School Maths Teachers is the name of it, is a great thing, and she's been incredibly successful with it. But as with all these people that I've been meeting, they are just so generous with their time and their support and their knowledge to help other people, and that's a real theme that's been coming across in terms of my interviews, but also in terms of when I've met people live and in person. The generosity has been something which I've been incredibly grateful for. One of the big things which I really have noticed and has come back as a recurring theme is the whole idea of mentoring, and my conversation with Vondell Singleton from the Champs Mentoring really sort of struck something within me, which, as I said, keeps coming back. But more than that was just that understanding that no matter how your life looks like now, it can be different. You can make a difference, and having people around you to show you the way is such a key thing. And he had that conversation with me about his mum being a drug addict and his father providing the drugs, and then his father being incarcerated and his mum dying. And just, I don't know about you, but I find that a very hard thing to imagine. And just how your life changes with that, how you witness something like that, how you decide you want your world to be. And actually, through mentoring, through meeting people, through opportunities that people gave him at school, and he's made it his life's mission to really support other people in doing that. And when you hear that, it just makes, certainly my life, the things which you think you're struggling with, or you think things won't actually change, or even if you really want them to change, so it kind of puts it all in perspective. If someone like that can do it and make a difference, not just to his life, but to thousands of children's lives around the country, and certainly with the great work he's doing in Chicago, then I think that's just an incredible thing for us to remember. The conversation I had with Jim Hart, the living of life after the death of a parent, which was incredibly touching, and also the fact that these things take time, they take understanding and just awareness, and you're never quite sure where that support comes from. You're never quite sure what's going to help you turn a corner, if indeed you need to turn a corner. These things just are. But bit by bit, life does move on, things change, people support you, people see you. I think that was his big message, was the fact people start to see you in a certain way, and from there you start to see yourself in a different way, which I think can really then just help life just move on, or certainly to take a slightly different path or a different direction, or how you turn up within that situation is a little bit different. And I really appreciate him being so honest and having such a heartfelt conversation with him. We've had some really supportive education things, as I said. Dinner Table Math with Angela McIver was one of those things, and how she sort of turned her passion for maths into a business which was supporting her children to begin with. It's about supporting her children and the people that were in the local area, and then from there she started to understand her need and the need around it for her to be able to support others in that area, which I think is a very positive thing to be able to do. I had a great conversation with Steve Stewart, who's from the podcast world. He's a podcast editor, and who's just, talking about how you don't know what's going to happen. His life was looking one way, his career was going one way, and he's now created an entirely different life through this medium of podcasting, which even just a few years ago wasn't even anything. It wasn't a thing that even existed, and now he's got this sort of full-time job going on in a world which isn't developed, which I think is interesting in terms of how we perceive education and what we're teaching our children, and how you are learning as an individual, because we're not quite sure what's around the corner. So yeah, it's a really fantastic thing to remember, just to give us a little bit of kind of, let's get excited about the new rather than just worrying too much about the old. And despite the fact that this podcast is based about wisdom and experience, we've had some younger people on the show as well. Zach Hesterberg is only age 24, but he's got a very successful company he's done, and him sharing his insights about how some of the things he was doing during his school life actually was making a big difference to him, I thought was very interesting. And even in such a young age, still understanding that some of those skills, just by showing up at school and being a certain way, has actually helped him start this successful company from such a young age. I talked to Alexis Avila about his Prepped and Polished, organisation, which is online tutoring for people, and I loved his sort of passion and his understanding and his desire and work ethic to really support people. And for those people looking to go to college soon, or if they're going through that process, my conversation with Nick Freud about Campus Reel and the fact that he's got students within campuses already showing online content and conversations and editing, so you get a behind the scenes idea of that college thing. I think the ingenuity of that is fantastic, and I think it really just makes a big difference to people's life. There obviously has been a real diverse amount of people in terms of where they live in the world and what they're actually doing. Having spoken to Kate Erickson, whose interview was about corporate merit to entrepreneurship, and of course Entrepreneurs on Fire, and that podcast is the podcast that started me in my podcasting journey, and I'm forever grateful, having met them a few times now. Their support and goodwill and knowledge and everything that goes with that has played a big part in the success of this podcast and now this podcast network. And she shared some really insightful things about exactly, how that comes about. And as I said, we've had some, different types of people on. Paul Filbert from the RSNO, who's the principal timpanist there up in Scotland, someone I went to college with, a friend of mine, sharing some of the things which gave him the opportunity to play one of the great orchestras and really live a life with its passion. As a professional musician myself, of course, I fully understand what it's like to be part and use your calling to actually make a difference in the world. And when you get a chance to do that every day, it really makes an amazing journey that makes you incredibly grateful for the opportunity, not only to know what your passion is, but to be able to enjoy it every day, share it with people every day. And I think that really is something to be incredibly grateful for, which again sort of takes us full circle in terms of Georgian's interview when he was talking about his gratitude podcast. I really appreciated Jodie Flynn coming on. She put so much effort and time into the podcast and shared some invaluable resources, and I'm going to take us through some of the resources that people have shared with us, which I think, as I said at the beginning, are going to be really important for people in terms of learning what it is that they want to do in life, and also how they might be able to structure some of their growth going forward, just learning from some of the greats that have written these books and produced these podcasts. Monica Busby, who was on just 2 or 3 weeks ago, talking about e-commerce kids, using her passion for e-commerce to support her child first of all, but then since then has this whole business now, helping teenagers and teenagers to be able to go and learn how to make money online, and it's a brand new world, this kind of thing, and actually changes your whole perspective, whether they're thinking about getting money for college or buying a car, or just want a career which doesn't look quite as 9 to 5 as they made before. I think is incredibly interesting. Certainly with me having 3 children at home, it just, you can see how some of these things are going to make a big difference to the lives that they live in, and how they can actually produce money and earn money in a completely different way than some of us have done in previous generations. And along the same sorts of lines, we've got Sadaf Faraza, who her early MBA idea of learning some of the skills that you need to live in this modern world, which you don't always necessarily get at school, but if you look out there, if you see what's going on, when you can just sort of show other people, share these resources, share the skills that some of us have learnt as we've got on, just to be as successful as we possibly can. And I think when businesses and when opportunities and learning comes up around these things, then you know that you're onto something really, really important. So I just want to finish with a little talk through some of the resources that some of these people have shared, which has been certainly, as I said, it's like a power bank of amazing things which we can all explore, and I'm just going to pick out a few of them, but certainly some of them which have come more than once, and also things which I'm certainly aware of, which I know have made a big difference to my life as well as others. So we have The Power of Full Engagement, and we have Brendan Bouchard, we have Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now, which has come up a couple of times with Jodie Flynn and also with Kate Erickson. I mean, that's an incredible book which can literally just change your world in the space of a few pages. Important podcasts that people have mentioned include Joe Rogan, that's come up a few times, as well as Tim Ferriss. I really like the idea of secrets self-made millionaires tell their kids. I mean, what an insight into what you think makes a difference, and how people have done that and supported their children. The 10X rule, is another one. And in terms of people, we talked about Bender Bashar, but also Dave Ramsey, someone who's all about getting out of debt and supporting you in your financial life. And that's just someone, if you haven't heard of him before, is someone that you should be aware of. And I'm glad that we've been able to share that as well. We've had the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The Bible, of course, has come up a few times. Many people, from a religious standpoint, have that as the most integral part of their life on a daily basis. So I'm really not surprised that that's been mentioned on probably the most of the podcasts throughout these sort of 25 episodes already. One other podcast which has been very influential and come up is the Flip Lifestyle podcast, and the reason I'm very pleased to have heard that is because I've actually been a guest on the Flip Lifestyle podcast, and actually will be a guest coming up again in the coming weeks and months. So I will let you know more about that when that comes up, but that's a very, very fantastic podcast for you to listen to if you get the chance. Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he's part of the whole Hay House organisation, and that's a place which is very well worth checking out. A big important book which has come up, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I think that's an incredibly interesting book that I've certainly read, and something I go back to on a regular basis. Really gives us an insight into how to deal with people and how to show up when you want to be able to make a difference and within a relationship, and actually understand that how you go about it, what you believe and how you want to be part of that can make a big difference with the outcome. Another important podcast, Smart Passive Income by Pat Flynn. Many people will have heard of that, but if you haven't, that's really a massive podcast that you have the opportunity to explore. And I've heard Pat Flynn keynote in some conferences I've been to, and he's an incredible speaker and a very passionate person in terms of education as well. So I definitely encourage you to go and check that out. Another book which has been come up more than once is the Good to Great by Jim Collins. That's something which has obviously influenced people greatly, as these things are when they come up on in multiple times. And I'm not going to list all of these things on the show notes of this particular podcast, but if you go, of course, to educationonfire.com, click on the podcast episodes, and then Learning on Fire will come down, and then all of the podcasts that we've done to now, they've all got show notes pages, and all of these fantastic resources, they're all there as part of each individual podcast show note, so you can actually go and explore all of those as you want to. So that was just a little thank you to everybody that's been on the show, and some of the highlights that I think in terms of things that we've been able to share, and some of the great resources that are out there. There are many more, so if you go through the show notes, you will find others in there as well. But I wanted to thank everyone that's been on the show. I wanted to thank you for listening. I really appreciate your time and your support. Always feel free to get in touch if you'd like to be able to do that and share anything. I'd be really grateful if you could go to iTunes and do a review for this podcast. It makes a big difference in terms of us being able to reach more and more people, and the more people we can reach, the more people hopefully we can influence in a positive manner and support in their world. And that's the most important thing that we're here to do, is just to share and support people to live authentically, to live with purpose and significance, and to live life on their terms. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing the next 25 episodes with you. Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.